Amelia Brooks had taught herself not to flinch every time the phone rang at an hour when no one should be calling. But that morning, the moment a Georgia number appeared on her screen, her hand froze halfway through frosting a lavender cream cake. 24 years earlier, someone from that same state had promised they would come back for her. They never did. The smell of hot black tea and fresh butter cakes still drifted through the kitchen behind Blue Hour Café. Out in the dining area, customers laughed softly beneath warm golden lights, while dried flowers hanging along the walls swayed gently in the cool air from the vents. Everything still looked peaceful, still looked beautiful, like a photograph from a magazine. Everything, except Amelia. The phone vibrated again, then a third time. She did not answer. She stood motionless in front of the white marble counter, staring at the voicemail notification glowing on her screen. Daniel Brooks, her father, the man who had left her at a church shelter when she was 9 years old and disappeared from her life as if she had never existed. Amelia locked the screen, but memories could not be shut off so easily. They came rushing back all at once, a faded blue suitcase, a long hallway that smelled like bleach and old paper, a woman kneeling in front of her, brushing hair away from her face while speaking in a voice so gentle it felt cruel. "Just a few weeks, sweetheart, I promise." A man standing behind her, signing paperwork without even looking up. Then the sound of a door closing. No one turned around. Amelia blinked hard and forced herself back toward the ovens, as though continuing to work might stop her heart from remembering what it felt like to be abandoned that day. But the body never forgets the things that once shattered it. Right then, Sophie Lane walked into the back kitchen carrying a stack of sales reports. She was about to say something when she stopped after seeing Amelia's face. "What happened?" Amelia shook her head too quickly. "Nothing." Sophie did not believe her, but she was smart enough to know that some memories bleed harder the more you touch them. Out front, a group of young customers were taking photos beneath the Blue Hour Cafe logo. On one of their phone screens played the interview clip that had gone viral the night before. The woman who grew up in foster care now owned the most beloved tea cafe chain in Savannah. An inspiring story, an extraordinary comeback. People loved stories like that. They loved watching abandoned children grow into successful adults. It made the world feel fairer somehow. But they never lived through the ugliest part of the story. They never knew what it felt like to sit beside a window for weeks, waiting for a car that was never coming back. The phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. This time, a woman's trembling voice filled the speaker. "Amelia, it's Mom." Just 3 words. But they tightened around Amelia's chest, like a hand dragging the past violently back to life. That woman once claimed she thought about her every single day. And yet it had taken her more than 20 years to finally call. Amelia slowly sat down in the chair near the kitchen window. Late afternoon sunlight stretched across the wooden floor while outside, customers continued walking into the cafe carrying pieces of their own lives with them. None of them knew the woman sitting silently in the corner had once been the child her own family chose to leave behind. And the most painful part was not that they abandoned her. It was that they only came back after the entire world discovered who she had become. A newspaper article. A television interview. A successful brand. Suddenly, the daughter who had once been too difficult to keep had become someone worth searching for. Amelia let out a soft laugh. There was nothing joyful about it. Because now, for the first time, she understood exactly what was happening. Her family had not returned because of love. They returned because life had finally proven that abandoning her was the most expensive mistake they had ever made. Before Amelia's family fell apart, everything still looked normal enough that no one outside the house could see the rot spreading beneath it. They lived in a small house on the east side of Savannah. The white paint on the porch had already started peeling, and the row of daisies in the front yard was always carefully watered by her mother, even when the electricity bill was sometimes overdue. On summer evenings, cicadas screamed endlessly outside the windows, while the kitchen smelled faintly of burnt barbecue and the sweet southern tea her father drank every night after work. For a while, Amelia truly believed her family was just like everyone else's. Her older brother, Nathan, was 3 years older than her, quiet, calm, always knowing exactly when to stop talking before adults got angry. Her younger sister, Lily, was still little, with pale blonde curls and the habit of clinging to their father as though he were the center of her entire world. And then there was Amelia, the child standing in the middle, old enough to notice things changing, too young to understand why love could disappear so quickly. Everything started after her father lost his job at the shipyard. At first, he said it was temporary. Then it became a few difficult weeks. Then a few difficult months. Then he started drinking. No one remembered exactly when the house began to change. They only knew that one day, the laughter disappeared before anyone even realized they had stopped laughing a long time ago. Bills piled across the kitchen counter. Her mother picked up extra shifts at the grocery store near the highway. Her father slept on the couch more often than in the bedroom. Nathan stayed locked inside his room with headphones over his ears. Lily started crying whenever a door slammed too hard. And Amelia became the child who listened. She listened to arguments through thin walls at midnight. Listened to her mother crying in the bathroom. Listened to glass bottles clattering against the sink. Listened to her father saying, in a broken voice, that he was trying his best. Adults always think children understand nothing. But the truth is children understand far more than anyone realizes. They just do not yet have the words to name their fear. The night Amelia realized her family would never be the same again was during a violent rainstorm. She stood in the dark hallway clutching an old teddy bear against her chest while listening to her mother scream behind the bedroom door. "We can't keep living like this." Her father stayed silent for several seconds before answering in a rough, exhausted voice. "Then what exactly do you want me to do?" Something shattered. Lily burst into tears. Nathan stepped out of his room but said nothing. Amelia remained frozen in the hallway. Because somehow, deep inside, she already felt that whatever happened next was going to involve her. 1 week later, their parents called all 3 children to the kitchen table. Her mother spoke in a voice so soft it almost sounded fake. She said they were going to separate for a while. She said they both still loved the children. She said everything would eventually be okay. Adults always use gentle voices when they are about to destroy someone's childhood. Then the conversation slowly shifted into practical things. Nathan would stay with their mother because he was smart and adaptable. Lily would stay with their father because she was still too young. No one mentioned Amelia first. No one asked what she wanted. No one said they were taking her with them. Amelia remembered that moment perfectly. The feeling that the air inside the room suddenly turned cold. As though she had just realized she was the one thing nobody wanted to carry once life became too crowded. That night, she heard her parents arguing again. Her mother spoke first. "You take her." Her father let out a bitter laugh. "I can barely take care of myself." Then came the sentence Amelia carried inside her for almost the rest of her life. Her mother said it quietly. "She's too sensitive. Keeping her here only makes everything harder." The next morning, her mother started packing Amelia's clothes into an old navy blue suitcase. She did not fold them neatly. She did not look Amelia in the eyes. Amelia sat on the edge of her bed, gripping the fabric of her shirt tightly in both hands. She still believed this was only temporary, because children always want to believe their parents, even when their souls have already started learning the truth. The car finally stopped in front of a church-operated shelter on the outskirts of the city. An old faded sign, a rusted playground, a woman smiling much too gently. Amelia's mother knelt in front of her and adjusted her collar, as though doing that could somehow make this less cruel. Just for a little while, her father signed paperwork at the front desk without barely lifting his head. Amelia stood there with the small suitcase beside her feet, waiting for someone to change their mind. No one did. A few minutes later, the door closed behind her parents. And for the first time in her life, Amelia understood what it truly felt like to be left behind. On her first night at the shelter, Amelia slept with her shoes still on. She curled herself tightly on the narrow single bed covered with a thin white sheet, so stiff she could hear the plastic mattress crackle every time she moved. Outside the window, yellow light from the parking lot spilled into the dark room. 3 other children slept there too, but no one spoke after lights out. One little girl cried softly beneath her blanket. A boy stared at the ceiling as though he had been doing it for so long he no longer remembered what sleep even felt like. And Amelia lay perfectly still, eyes wide open, because she still believed her parents were coming back for her. That was the cruelest thing about children. They always want to believe a little longer, even after their hearts have already started breaking. The next morning, Amelia sat beside the glass window near the front of the common room. From there, she could clearly see every car entering the parking lot. Every time she heard an engine, her eyes instantly lit up, then faded again. A delivery truck bringing food. A church volunteer. A woman arriving to adopt a dog. Not her parents. On the fifth day, an older girl sat beside Amelia and asked in a voice so calm it felt cold. "They told you they'd come back too?" Amelia nodded. The girl shrugged. "They always say that." Then she walked away. That sentence stayed with Amelia for years afterward. Not because it was cruel, because it was true. Time inside the foster care system does not move like ordinary childhood. It is measured by relocations, new names to memorize, adults pretending to care while carefully protecting themselves from getting emotionally attached to children they already know will eventually leave. After a few months at the shelter, Amelia was transferred to her first foster family. A married couple with 3 boys of their own, and several foster children already living in the house. They did not hit her. They did not scream at her. Somehow, that almost made everything worse. Because quiet indifference hollows people out slower, but deeper. Amelia's clothes remained inside plastic bags for months. She slept on a pull-out couch in the extra living room. Whenever relatives came to visit, the woman of the house always said the same thing. "Sweetheart, why don't you go upstairs for a while?" Little by little, Amelia learned how to disappear before anyone had to ask her twice. That became her first survival skill. Do not become a burden. Do not need too much. Do not take up space for too long. When that family finally decided they could no longer handle additional foster children, Amelia was moved again. Then again. Then again. Some houses were so crowded that food disappeared from the refrigerator before she could even take her share. Some adults called all the foster children by the same nickname because they did not care enough to remember individual names. And some places were worse. The 4th foster family Amelia stayed with had a woman who smiled constantly in public. Every Sunday she brought homemade pies to church and called all the children little angels. But the moment the front door closed, her voice changed completely. "You should be grateful somebody was willing to keep you. Maybe if you were easier to love, your parents wouldn't have left." She never hit Amelia. She did not need to. Some people know exactly where to stab, so the wound never heals. By the age of 13, Amelia apologized even when she had done nothing wrong. Sorry for standing in the way. Sorry for taking the last piece of food. Sorry for coughing. Sorry for existing. Her body started reacting to fear long before her mind understood what was happening. She flinched every time a door slammed too hard. She struggled to sleep. She woke up with headaches. She hid food beneath her pillow, as though tomorrow there might not be enough left to eat. But the thing that truly changed Amelia began in a tiny kitchen behind an old tea shop near the Savannah riverfront. Every Saturday afternoon, local schools sent students there to volunteer. Most of the kids hated it. Amelia did not. The tea shop belonged to Eleanor Hayes, a woman in her 60s with silver hair always pinned into a low bun and sharp eyes that seemed capable of seeing through every lie in the room. She watched Amelia carefully while the girl wiped tables and arranged teacups. Then one day, Eleanor pushed a tray of dried lavender flowers toward her and said quietly, "If you need to cry, cry. But your hands still keep working." It was the first time in years that someone had seen Amelia's pain without treating her with pity. And in that moment, she almost burst into tears. Eleanor Hayes never asked Amelia why the girl always glanced toward the door every time the wind chimes outside began to ring. She never asked why a 13-year-old child flinched every time someone raised their voice. Some adults have lived long enough to understand that certain wounds do not need to be reopened to know they are still bleeding. Eleanor's tea shop sat quietly on a corner in old Savannah, where the windows fogged every morning with the scent of bergamot and jasmine tea. Elderly customers often came there to read newspapers, sip hot tea, and talk about the weather as though the world had never broken anyone's heart. Amelia loved that place from the very beginning. Not because of the tea, because of the silence. Inside the small kitchen behind the shop, everything had order. Dried flowers hung neatly by type. Tea jars always sat exactly where they belonged. Cakes were sliced with perfect precision down to the smallest corner. No shouting, no doors slamming, no one walking away halfway through. For the first time in years, Amelia felt as though she had stepped into a place where her soul could finally lower its guard. At first, Eleanor only gave her simple tasks: wash the cups, wipe the tables, pick out the damaged flower petals. But Eleanor watched carefully. She noticed the way Amelia always did more than what she was asked. The way she checked everything 3 times, as though making one mistake might cause someone to become angry. The way she apologized even when she had done everything correctly. One rainy afternoon, Eleanor placed a warm lavender honey cake in front of Amelia and said calmly, "Try cutting it, Amelia froze. I've never done that before." "Then today is your first time." It was the first time in years that someone had spoken to Amelia without disappointment or warning hidden beneath their words. Someone simply believed she was capable of learning. From that day on, Eleanor began teaching her how to prepare tea, bake desserts, and blend floral scents together. She taught Amelia how to crush dried rose petals by hand to preserve their natural fragrance, how to whip cream long enough for mousse to become soft without separating, how to judge the perfect baking time by the color of a cake instead of relying on a clock. Those small lessons slowly changed Amelia in ways nobody noticed, not even Amelia herself, because when a child grows up, surrounded by chaos for too long, stability begins to feel like magic. By the age of 16, Amelia spent nearly every weekend at the tea shop. While other teenagers went to parties or on dates, she stood behind the counter learning how to decorate cakes with edible flowers and memorizing tea varieties like someone studying an entirely new language. But what Eleanor gave Amelia was never just a skill. It was dignity. One evening after closing, Amelia accidentally dropped an entire tray of porcelain cups onto the floor. The sound shattered through the room sharply. She immediately froze. Her heart pounded violently. Her breathing locked inside her chest. Because in her mind, moments like this always led to yelling. Or worse. Eleanor simply stared at the broken pieces for a few seconds before handing Amelia a broom. "Be more careful next time." That was all. Amelia bent down to sweep the floor, but her hands trembled so badly she could barely hold the broom handle. Eleanor watched her quietly for a long moment before speaking in a low, gentle voice. "Not every mistake makes people leave you, Amelia." The sentence stopped her cold. Because for the first time, someone had unknowingly touched the deepest wound she had spent years trying to hide. At school, Amelia remained the quiet girl with cautious eyes that never fully relaxed. But her grades began rising quickly. Teachers started noticing her. Some people called it talent. It was not talent. It was survival. Children who have been abandoned learn very quickly how to become exceptional. Deep inside, they believe that if they become useful enough, successful enough, perfect enough, maybe next time someone will finally choose to stay. One afternoon, Eleanor stood beside Amelia while she brushed honey glaze over a cake and asked, "Do you know what makes a tea shop survive?" Amelia shook her head. "It's not good tea." Eleanor smiled softly. "It's how people feel when they walk inside." Amelia looked up at her. Then Eleanor said the words Amelia would carry with her for the rest of her life. People always return to places where they feel wanted. That sentence stayed inside Amelia for years afterward. Long enough that later, when the entire city came to know Blue Hour Café as the warmest place in Savannah, nobody realized it had all started with a little girl who had once been left behind by her own family. Amelia left the foster care system at 18 with 2 old suitcases, a paper envelope filled with records nobody had ever truly explained to her, and barely enough money to make anyone feel safe for more than a week. No family waited for her outside. No one said welcome home. There was only a bus station, the heavy August heat, and the feeling that she had just been thrown out of the only place that, despite everything, had at least offered her a bed to sleep in. That was the part nobody talked about when it came to children raised in foster care. People called it adulthood. But most of the time, it was really just being pushed off a cliff and forced to learn how not to die on the way down. Amelia rented a tiny room in South Savannah with two other girls. The apartment was so old the pipes screamed every night, and the walls were thin enough to hear the neighbor coughing at 3 in the morning. But it was the first place where she owned her own key. The first place where nobody had the power to move her away with nothing more than a signature. During the day, Amelia attended vocational school for beverage service and restaurant management. In the afternoons, she worked as a waitress at a small diner near the harbor. At night, she rushed across town to help at Eleanor's tea shop. Some nights she came home close to midnight, her feet aching so badly she could barely remove her shoes. And yet strangely, Amelia had never felt more alive than during those years. Because for the first time in her life, her future no longer belonged to someone else. One winter evening, Eleanor found Amelia asleep at the kitchen table after closing time, and quietly asked, "What are you trying so hard to prove?" Amelia stayed silent for several seconds, before answering softly, "I just don't want to go back to living like that again." Eleanor said nothing more, because she understood that people raised in instability often work as though resting for too long might drag them back into darkness. By the age of 23, Amelia had started selling handmade tea boxes and small desserts at weekend markets near Chippewa Square. At first, it was nothing more than a few old wooden tables and a crooked handwritten sign. But then something strange began to happen. People came back. They remembered her name. They remembered the orange blossom tea, the lavender honey cakes, the feeling of peace they carried away after standing at her small booth. One older woman once told Amelia, "You make this place feel like home." Amelia smiled politely, but deep inside, those words almost stole the breath from her chest. Because home had once been the most painful thing she knew. Around that time, Sophie Lane crashed into Amelia's life like a storm that moved too fast and talked too loudly. Sophie worked in freelance marketing, drank more coffee than water, spoke almost nonstop, and possessed the rare ability to recognize potential in people before they saw it in themselves. One afternoon, she looked around Amelia's tiny booth and announced, "You're not selling tea, you're selling healing." Amelia laughed because she thought Sophie was exaggerating. But Sophie was serious. She was the one who pushed Amelia to build the very first version of Blue Hour Café. Deep midnight blue walls, soft golden lighting, dried flowers hanging from the ceiling, slow music drifting through the room. A place where exhausted people felt allowed to finally breathe. Blue Hour opened its first location when Amelia was 26 years old. It was a small cafe tucked inside old Savannah, with 6 wooden tables and large glass windows overlooking a narrow cobblestone street. On opening day, Amelia stood behind the counter for 8 straight hours, without almost ever sitting down. She was terrified customers would never return. Terrified rent would swallow everything she had built. Terrified she was only pretending to be successful before life came back to destroy her all over again. But customers kept coming. The next day too, and the week after that. Then a local blogger published an article calling Blue Hour the warmest place in Savannah on the loneliest days of people's lives. That night, Amelia sat alone in the kitchen behind the cafe, holding a warm cup of tea between her hands. She cried for a very long time. Not because of the article, but because for the first time in her life, she began understanding something the 9-year-old version of herself had never dared believe. Maybe her worth had never depended on who chose to stay. Years later, when Blue Hour became one of the most recognizable cafe brands across Georgia, people often described Amelia as inspirational, a strong woman, a story of survival, a woman who overcame impossible odds. But nobody knew that every time an unknown number appeared on her phone, her heart still went cold for a few seconds. Because some children never fully outgrow the fear that one day, everyone they love will leave them again. The meeting happened on a Tuesday night after Blue Hour Café had already closed. Amelia chose that location intentionally. Not her home. Not a restaurant. Not anywhere that carried the feeling of family. She wanted to meet them in the place she had built with her own hands, a place that did not belong to the past. Outside the glass windows, Savannah glowed beneath the evening lights. A light drizzle blurred the old cobblestone street, while the warm golden sign of Blue Hour reflected across the wet pavement like a quiet painting. 4 people stood outside. Her family. Or, more accurately, the people who used to be her family. Amelia watched them from behind the tea counter for a very long time, before finally unlocking the door. Her father looked older than she expected. His shoulders had collapsed inward, his face looked hollow, and exhaustion filled the eyes of a man who had spent too many years losing. Her mother still clutched the strap of her purse whenever she was nervous. Nathan stood silently behind them like someone who already understood he had no right to walk into this room. Only Lily looked directly through the glass, like someone carrying too many things to say and no idea where to begin. Amelia unlocked the door. No one hugged her. Thankfully. Some distances should not be broken too quickly, just because emotions become overwhelming. They sat around the long table in the center of the café, the same place where customers usually laughed, drank tea, and took photos beneath the dried flowers hanging from the ceiling. Tonight, it felt more like a courtroom. Her mother spoke first. "You look different." Amelia almost laughed. 24 years of disappearance, and that was the first sentence she chose to say. Amelia sat down across from them and folded her arms calmly. "You didn't come here to talk about my face, so go ahead." The air immediately turned heavy. Nathan spoke first. He talked about difficult years, about how their father lost control after the divorce, about their mother struggling financially, about the mistakes adults make when life corners them with nowhere left to run. Her mother cried. Her father lowered his head. Lily stayed silent. Amelia let them finish. She let them use words like hardship, helplessness, confusion, chaos, words far cleaner than the truth. Then Amelia slowly stood up and walked toward the back counter. When she returned, she placed 4 thin folders onto the table, one in front of each of them. Nathan frowned and opened his first. Inside were shelter intake records, foster transfer documents, forms confirming there had been no guardian contact, lists of schools Amelia had been forced to move between, psychological evaluations from when she was 13 years old, and one old paper that clearly stated, "No emergency contact available." No one spoke. Amelia looked directly at them. "You all keep saying life was difficult." She paused for several seconds. "So let me make this simple." Her voice stayed calm. "You didn't lose me. You left me." The room went silent. Even the sound of rain against the windows suddenly felt louder. Her mother broke down crying. Her father closed his eyes, as though those words had finally become impossible to escape. But Amelia was not finished. She talked about foster homes where her clothes stayed inside plastic bags for months, about nights hiding food beneath her pillow, about apologizing simply for standing in someone's way, about panic attacks every time a door slammed too hard. Then she talked about Eleanor, about Sophie, about the people who shared no blood with her but still chose to That was the moment the room truly started breaking apart. Because for the first time, her family understood something unbearable. Strangers had loved her better than they did. Her father finally spoke in a trembling voice. "I have heart disease, Amelia." His hands shook slightly. "I just wanted to fix things before it's too late." Nathan quickly added that they were not expecting immediate forgiveness. They only hoped Amelia might help their father receive better treatment. Maybe support each other like family again. And that was the exact moment every final disguise fell away. Amelia looked at them for a very long time. Then she leaned back in her chair, her voice calm in a way that almost felt frightening. "So this is the real reason you came back, isn't it?" No one answered. But silence is often more honest than words. They came back after seeing her on television, after learning she had become successful, after the name Amelia Brooks finally carried value. Not when she was 10 years old crying alone inside foster bedrooms. Not when she was 18 and nearly homeless. Now, only now, when she had become the safe place they wanted to return to. Amelia took a slow breath. I did not build this life so the people who abandoned me could use it as their final landing place. Her mother burst into tears. Nathan lowered his head. Lily wiped her eyes again and again, while staring at Amelia as though afraid she might disappear the second she looked away. Only Amelia remained still, calm, steady, like someone who had finally realized that real power is not revenge. Real power is no longer needing the people who hurt you to choose you ever again. Some wounds never fully disappear, but sometimes surviving them becomes the very thing that teaches us our true worth. Amelia spent years waiting for someone to come back for her. In the end, she learned the most important thing was never who left. It was who stayed. And most importantly, that she stayed for herself. If this story touched you, let me know in the comments. Do you believe forgiveness always means giving people another chance? And if you enjoy emotional storytelling, family drama, and powerful survival stories like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more stories every week.